Okay, we are live from Lookout Mountain. Pretty day.
Hi everybody, I'm Alan Shuptrine. Welcome to number 4 watercolor demo, No Fear Watercolor. I own Alan Shuptrine LLC. I also own Shuptrine's Gallery in Chattanooga, and I'm a watercolor artist, have been most of my adult life. And we've already had a great watercolor day today. I had 2 lessons that were both virtual lessons that I gave to students out west. And so we've already been delving into watercolor today. And I was mostly critiquing their works, showing them how to make their works a little bit more dramatic and have their realism, jump off the page more. And so we were talking about various different things. So it's already been a fun day. Hey, I want to tell you about an upcoming event that we're having this coming Friday, April 3rd, from 10 a.m. to noon. It's a 2-hour virtual watercolor lesson that I'm going to give. And you can sign up for that if you're interested in it, if you know of someone who's interested in it. Maybe a serious artist, a hobbyist, a serious hobbyist. Again, it's from 10 to 12, so a 2-hour lesson. You can go to my Venmo account right over here to reserve your spot. So just go to Venmo, and my Venmo account is at Alan-Shuptrine. So just go there to reserve your spot.
For 2 hours?
It's a 2-hour lesson. It's going to be $50. And listen, hey, I just wanted to say thank you guys so much for hanging in there with me in the whole self-quarantining and everything. A shout out to all.
Oh, hold on. What's your notes?
Oh, a shout out to all the nurses and doctors and so forth. Thank you guys so much for putting your life on the line and keeping us all safer. So I just want to say that the cost is $50 for that watercolor lesson coming up.
In the notes.
And also, when you go to Venmo and you find my account at Alan-Shuptrine to pay for the watercolor workshop, in the notes section, just be sure to put your email address on there. And that way we can communicate with you and keep you updated and so forth. And again, it's a 2-hour lesson. And you're also going to want to download a program called Zoom, Z-O-O-M, and that's the platform that I'm going to come to you live on. It's free to download, but if you have any questions, you get stuck on something, we'll help you through it. You can just go to the gallery at shuptrines.com to communicate with us, send us an email. Here's the email address, the gallery at shuptrines.com. So last time we didn't have enough time to finish because working on trees and textures and tree bark and grass and lichen, all that stuff, is very, very difficult. Oh, and by the way, the watercolor lesson coming up, I forgot to tell you, it's about grasses. And this is what we were working on last time. We actually invented this very dramatic watercolor, highlighting this tree here in the foreground. And we were talking a little bit about foreground, midground, and background. And in order to achieve that in watercolor, I use all 3 of the types of watercolor techniques. The first one is wet and wet technique. And basically that's where you wet the entire surface, you put some watercolor pigment and water into that wetness, and then it swims everywhere. And this is the least amount of controlled watercolor that you can do. But it gives these beautiful atmospheric techniques where colors separate out and so forth. So I love to do this in the backgrounds. And you can see in the watercolor that we're doing that my background, I suggested a stand of trees back here, very, very much out of focus, but changes in color, changes in temperature and so forth, just like the actual forest would be. Then the second type of watercolor is wet on dry. And this is where you take a wash of watercolor, both pigment and water, and you actually paint it onto a dry surface. And this gives you a sharp, hard line. And that's very effective, especially for accuracy and so forth. And then there's a third type of watercolor, which is dry brush. And dry brush is where you pick up mostly pigment on your brush, hardly any water at all. Mm-hmm. And you sort of scumble it across the texture of the paper, and it gives you wonderful texture and detail and so forth. So going back to this watercolor that we started, now you can see here where I still have my grasses down here masked off, but I haven't unmasked any of the lichen on this tree yet as well. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to do the big reveal. We're going to unmask the lichen on this tree. So when you do that, in order to pull the lichen off of that, we're actually going to use our pickup square, which is made of crepe. And so I'm going to take this and actually pull up all of the mask that I put down. You can see these spots on the tree that are revealing themselves now. And especially on this leading edge of the tree, this is where I'm going to have some bunches of lichen and so forth. I'm also going to have some grasses. And this limb that tapers right here and comes toward the viewer, this is really the highlight of this entire painting. This is where all the drama is going to be. And in order to make this look as realistic as possible, you may note that I've actually colored the bark and the texture of this tree much warmer in color than the rest of the tree. We talked about the nose of the tree last time and how the nose of the tree that comes forward toward the viewer widens as it gets to the bottom. And also the color is warmer at the point of tangency than the rest of the tree. Back here, I put a very, very dark, almost blue-like shadow.
So we're going to do that.
So now, like the magic of television, I'm going to take this section right here and blow this up so that you can see it a little bit better. And this is a totally different piece of watercolor paper, and I've prepared this area. And I need to remove just a little bit more of this lichen on the tree here. But you can see these spots revealing themselves, and you can also see here in the main trunk of the tree that I haven't had a chance to paint in the bark yet. So in order to paint the lichen, though, let's just assume that the bark was finished at this point, okay? In order to paint in the lichen, I'm going to actually mix a couple of different colors over here that I've put out, well, several actually on my palette. I have some Aureolin yellow, I have some cerulean blue, this is ochre yellow. These two piles are the same, actually. This is just what was on my palette today. And I actually have some burnt sienna over here, some ultramarine blue, and then this is Hooker's green. And you'll notice out in nature that lichen, and of course one of the things that, being an artist, becoming an artist, or just simply enjoying art and so forth, you'll actually notice things different out in nature also. And I tell my students this too. Start looking at the color of lichen. Check out a dogwood tree this spring, especially when it gets completely in bloom, and notice the various different greens and blues in the actual lichen color. But I'm mixing a little bit of cerulean, Aureolin, some burnt sienna, and also some yellow ochre. And I'm going to pull most of that paint actually out of my brush.
While you're doing that, can you say hi to Martina?
Hey, Martina. Oh my goodness, we have Martina on here, tuning in all the way from Germany. What a thrill. I know that it's probably late at night there, probably 9 or 10 o'clock. Thank you so much for tuning in. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pull most of this pigment out of my brush with a paper towel and then come over here to where the lichen is. And the secret to painting lichen is it's not all necessarily one color. You want to make it a various different array of colors, but so I could start out with a little bit of green, and notice how as I'm painting this on, you kind of want to make sure that these lichens actually come out looking like sort of like a rosette. So in essence, it can be a number of concentric circles or concentric arcs. But you might start out with a color like that, and then I'll go ahead and start painting this one in down here too. And the secret is not to paint the little tiny white edges that are at the little perimeter, because that's going to be the little spot. As I was telling you, in the last, I think it was 2 demos ago, we were painting a leaf. That's the area that's going to allow it to sort of jump off the page, and it's going to be an edge where you can actually place a shadow behind. So here's this green color that I've painted on the lichen first. Now I'm going to go back and actually follow that up with a little bit of yellow ochre, and get a little bit of water because that's kind of dry, and a little bit of burnt sienna with that, and a little bit of ultramarine blue. And I kind of want a dark yellow color. There we go. Kind of like a Dijon mustard color. I'm going to go in here, and where I have these little white voids, I'm just going to paint just a little bit of yellow, dark brown yellow in those areas, and that's going to actually look like the shadow behind all these little curls. This is actually a dull number 6 brush. Dull meaning that I've actually worn the point off of this by doing all the dry brush that I've been doing. And so that would be stage number 2. And then you can actually go in and paint a little bit bluer, this time a little bit bluer green, coming in with a little bit of cerulean, And I do like wiping most of it off so that I can really control the amount that I'm actually going to put on here. But a mixture of many of these various different colors layered in here gives you that beautiful lichen effect. And make sure that you continue to make each one of the edges white as you go.
You say hi to Katie?
Hey, Katie. So glad you tuned in. Now I'm going to go back to this painting that we're trying to create here. And you can see that right over here on the right-hand side, this is my light source. So therefore, the light is going to be coming in and hitting the tree right here. And this leading edge of the tree is so important because this is where I'm going to get the most drama out of my painting. It's where my lightest light is going to touch my darkest dark. And that is so important. Now this tree back here in the midground, I mentioned this last time, it's so important that this tree not steal the show. So you do want him to actually exist, but you don't want him to exist either. He's there, he's in a different focus than the background. I also mentioned to you about creating depth with the size of an object relative to its surrounding and also the temperature, okay? So 3 things, focus, size of the object, and temperature help communicate to the viewer distance. So really, the way we control the viewer also is, while this is the subject of my painting, I actually want you to go up this meadow, and I want you to see what this exciting ball of light is up here. Then I might want you to follow this limb across here and come back down into the subject. And now what I've done is I've made you go full circle in this painting. And this could be considered the classic O or oval composition.
Oh, we're doing detail today.
Right. So the detail, yeah, Bonnie's keeping me focused. Back to the detail. All right, yeah, because I could talk all day. And that's one of the reasons why we didn't finish last time.
Oh, wait a minute, what's this brush?
Okay, so this is a smaller brush. This is a number 8, but it's by a different brand. So, you know, every brush manufacturer's brand, is quite different in size. You'll find. So
smaller goes
Yeah,
up.
smaller brush, nylon Taklon brush, so that I have a lot of ability to do a lot of detail here.
Well, wait a minute, the other one was 8.
Yeah, the other one was was it a number 8 or number 6?
Wait a minute, the other one was 6.
It's a number 6. Yeah, this is a number 8. And
wait a minute, so you go up the...
No. Actually, the larger the number, the larger the size brush. Okay? But like I said, you know, some brush manufacturers are quite different.
Okay.
So this actually computes to really probably a number 2 round. Now notice this warmer brown color that I'm mixing up here. I don't know if you can see that on my palette or not, but
Say hi to Dawn.
Hey Dawn. The reason I'm mixing up this lighter brown color, this warmer brown color, is because this is the edge of the tree that has been bathed with light. And so last time we talked about making the tree bark. And so as I told you last time, the way that I actually make tree bark is with a series of the shapes of the number 4. So I bring the paintbrush down, and then like I'm making a number 4. Boom, boom, just like this. But you have to remember that out on the leading edge of this, the pieces of bark would be much closer together. So I'm going to do a number of lines that are close together at the actual edge, and that tells the viewer that this root extension of the trunk actually rolls around this. This is how to make it look 3-dimensional. But out here at its point of tangency, the piece of bark is much larger in width. And Bonnie is zoomed in so close on this that the back of my paintbrush is occasionally hitting the iPhone. So I'm sorry that that's actually happening. Now you can see here where I'm trying to dodge all of these various different pieces of grass that are going to extend up and into this area. So I'm trying to be very, very careful in this area. So this is basically how I make the tree bark. Now, let's go down inside a piece of tree bark, and let's go down in this one here specifically. You see how that's kind of squared off at the bottom? It's actually going to be rounded off when I finish, and we don't have enough time to actually do all of these, but I'm going to go back and get some water on the end of my brush, okay, and clean all the pigment off of it. Then I'm going to blot that off, and I'm going to go down into that piece of tree bark. And if I really want to make that piece of tree bark jump off the page, I'm going to lighten the front edge of it. And so if I wet that piece and then I blot it with a little paper towel like that, I can actually make it jump off there. Now I'll do another one right here, right beside it. And I'm actually going to lighten this piece of tree bark. And by doing so, though, I'm going to lose a lot of my detail. So I'll be able to go in later and actually carve in the detail around that piece of tree bark. And then here's where the fun begins. And we don't have enough time in this particular example to do everything, but going back to my dull round brush that I have, it's not really important that it be pointed, but I'm going to go get this color that I've been working with. Okay, and I had a little bit of green actually in my paint as well, but I'm going to go back and get that color. Now it's mostly pigment, hardly any water at all. And I could go back in over the top of this and just ever so lightly with the corner of the brush, just drag it across there. Now I can actually put detail into the tree bark itself using the texture of the paper and actually putting lines in the detail of the tree bark. Now by doing this, if sometimes you are losing detail around the perimeter of each one of the pieces of bark, you can always go in later and carve that back into the tree. So over here is where the cool shadow is. And so let me do the big reveal on this particular little baby watercolor. I'm going to actually pull the mask off of these pieces of grass back in here and show you what a ghost-like image this is now. You may say, oh my goodness, you're going to have to start completely over. Yes, I am going to start completely over in this area, layering the grass from back to front. Now, going back to my example about temperature and changing the temperature as you get farther away, we want to mix up a cool green, the same green that we did before back in this area.
Shout out to Mont Haven.
Hey, Mont Haven. Thank you.
Cheryl and Joe.
Hey, Cheryl and Joe. How are you guys doing? I hope you're faring okay during this very, very difficult time.
And our tornado.
And I know that you guys, I was so concerned about you guys making it through the tornado because I know that it was up there near, a lot of it was up there near Mount Juliet, which is not too far from Hendersonville. So glad you guys are okay. So we're going to mix a cool green for the distant grasses back here because I want to communicate to the viewer that there's a lot of space between here and all the way back to this stand of woods. So the way that we do that, using dry brush again, I can actually go in and just suggest the fact that there's texture back there with this green. And as I get to the place where I've actually masked it off, I'm going to actually come into that masked area a little bit, just a little bit, because I want to gradually communicate to the viewer that this grass is getting warmer and warmer. So I'll finish off with that amount of coolness there. Now we need to add some warmth to that grass. So I'll go in and add a little bit of ochre yellow to that same wash, and I'll change brushes, this time to a Tackline liner brush. And this is a number 1, a size number 1. And I'll go in there with that warmer color. And yes, believe it or not, and there's my dogs barking, so it sounds like the UPS man is here. But I'm going to go in and I'm going to very, very lightly on each little blade of grass, I'm going to actually paint in these with color. You may say, you mean you paint every blade of grass one at a time? Pretty much. So you want to just kind of layer this in as we go. And as we bring that forward toward the viewer, that'll get warmer and warmer in color until we get up here in the foreground.
Did you know what this was going to look like before you started?
I really didn't.
I think you have to go backwards to even.
I really didn't. Now back
doing.
Here in this cool shadow, we will also be painting grass. So I'll go back to that same cool green on the palette over here by mixing some ultramarine blue, a little bit of ochre yellow, just to turn it a greenish color. I'll go get a tiny tinge of Hooker's green. I'll go get a little bit of burnt sienna and make sure that it's in the cool value because I want it to be in the shadow of the tree. So anything that's cool is right here, but I'll actually manually pull a few blades of grass in this shadow and continue working on the shadow of the tree and so forth. I'll even paint some cool grass on this side of the tree and so forth. And then we'll have to develop this entire painting with shadows. In other words, this limb perhaps is casting a shadow onto this limb and this limb and so forth. And so I'll have all these dramatic shadows like I did in my painting over against the wall called Twisted, where we started this whole video from. So
how long did it take for you to paint twisted though? 4 or 5
Oh,
months?
yeah, it took me about 4 or 5 months. But you have to realize, though, that I paint about, maybe 10 paintings at a time, and I move from painting to painting so that, I never get bored with one subject. I'm always jumping from painting to painting and taking my 10-inch white dinner plate with me so that I take my entire palette with me so that I don't have to
So the detail
remember
of
those
the
colors.
trees.
So the detail of the trees, we'll be going back now. The next step, if you were to continue this painting along, right here on the leading edge of this limb here, where all the drama is, the lichen would be much, much warmer in color right here. So I'll go in and put a few series of little arcs here to kind of look like it's a rosette. And don't forget my cerulean blue, so I'll go get some of that, mix it with that to get that beautiful sort of Paris, what I call a acid or Paris green color. And I'll go in and paint those little arcs in there too. And that gives you that beautiful realistic looking lichen color. Now for lichen that's way off in the distance, and notice how this limb is going to basically be the showcase limb. It tapers thicker because it comes toward the viewer. It gives you that effect that you can almost just reach out and grab that limb and pull it off the paper. And the way that you achieve that is with the size of the limb. You taper it thicker as it comes toward the viewer, but you also make it warm. But these little pieces of lichen that are way back here, I may not paint all that detail in. I may just simply paint it solid and then go in and blot it once so that I get that nice transparent effect. Put a little bit more darkness in there, and depending whether or not that lichen is in shadow or not determines its color. So out here where the sun is bathing this giant piece of moss or lichen on the front of the tree, that needs a real warm effect of lichen. So over here, this would be a much different color than, say, up here on the side of the tree. So this will be a much, much warmer color. So you basically get the effect of that.
How long will it take for you to finish this?
I'll probably finish this in 2 or 3 more days, and then we'll have this beautiful, realistic painting. I want to say something a little bit about what I teach my students, and that is this. Don't ever forget what the message is in your painting. The message that you want to communicate to them, whether it be, opening it up to all the senses, or, whether you're trying to communicate the message of peace and solitude or what have you. Don't ever get distracted by, other parts in your painting. And that's one of the reasons why I title my work from the very first brush stroke, because I'm so afraid that I'll go off in a different direction and I won't stay focused on it. So just a little tip, you can use that to your advantage or not. But anyway, that wraps up trees in detail. Now, you may say, well, gosh, we just scratched the surface. That's true, we did. So if you want to get more in depth, I'll be happy to work with you one-on-one. Just sign up for, just go to the gallery at shuptrines.com. You can book a private lesson with me, and if you're halfway around the world, doesn't really matter. We can do this together, even if I have to teach you at 3 o'clock in the morning.
Can we do another free demo on Friday, too, after your 2-hour lesson?
Yeah, we could do that. We could do yeah, sure. So you want to do it at noon or 1 o'clock?
Probably about 12:30.
All right, so we're not only going to do a group lesson
from 10 to 12.
From 10 to 12 this
Eastern
Friday.
Standard Time.
That's Eastern Standard Time. That's April the 3rd, this Friday. But right after that, right after the group lesson, I'll do another demo at 12:30 p.m. free Eastern Standard Time. So just trying to find creative ways to stay alive in this coronavirus world, as an artist. Shout out to everybody who tuned in. Thank you guys so much, and let's have a wonderful day. Till next time, thanks again.